Welcome to the Sleep Narrator. I know you use these videos to drift off into slumber, so before you close your eyes, take a second to like the video and subscribe. Also, let me know where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind wander as I tell you a story. Room 1, inspired by true events from the Hotel President. Part 1, The Arrival, Chapter 1. The Man with No Luggage. January, Kansas City, Missouri. The sky hung low with winter smog, a muddy sheet smeared across rooftops and smokestacks. Snow had melted into black slush along the curbs, and the air tasted faintly of soot and radiator steam. Across the street from Union Station, the Hotel President loomed like a granite mausoleum, its brass doors polished, its revolving entrance slow and patient, as though it had all the time in the world. At precisely 1:20 p.m., a man stepped out of a taxi. He wore a brown overcoat, collar pulled tight, and a fedora dipped low over one eye. In his left hand, he carried a single comb and a toothbrush wrapped in tissue. Nothing else. No suitcase. No hatbox. No companion. His shoes were too polished for the streets, and his eyes, when they flashed up at the bellboy, were bloodshot and dull like marbles left in whiskey. "Checking in?" the boy asked. The man nodded, then stepped through the door without another word. He walked like someone listening to something no one else could hear. Chapter 2. The hotel clerk, Randolph Keene, would later testify that the man signed the register with a shaky hand. His signature read, Roland T. Owen. His handwriting slanted unnaturally upward, as if it were trying to escape the page. "No bags, Mr. Owen?" Keene had asked. "Waiting on them," the man said. "They'll be delivered later." He requested an inside room. No windows, if possible. That wasn't common. Most guests preferred a city view or at least some daylight. Room 1046 was one of the few with only a narrow vent shaft, instead of a window. Quiet, isolated. Keene nodded and rang for bellboy Charles Blugger to escort Mr. Owen upstairs. "Traveling for business or pleasure?" the boy asked in the elevator. "Neither." The conversation died. In room 1046, the man stood still as Charles turned on the light and placed the room key on the desk. Charles noticed something peculiar. The man didn't sit down, didn't take off his coat. He just stood there, looking at the phone.
Need anything else?
No calls. It wasn't a thank you, it was a warning. Chapter 3. The First Visit. At 7:00 a.m. the next morning, the hotel maid, Mary Soptic, knocked on the door to clean. She'd been told the room was unoccupied. The door was locked. She used her passkey and entered. Mr. Owen was sitting in the dark, alone, the phone on the floor beside him. He startled when she came in. "You may clean," he muttered. "Just leave the towels." She did, quickly. She couldn't explain why later, but she felt watched the entire time, even though he didn't move, didn't speak again. Something about the way he sat in the dark, wearing nothing but a pair of trousers, made her uneasy. The mirror had been covered with a towel. Chapter 4. Unlisted Calls. At 10:30 a.m., a woman's voice was heard in the hallway outside room. "He doesn't know what he's saying," she whispered. "He's drunk. Or scared." A second voice responded. A man's, not Roland's. Calm. Measured. "I told you. No more visits. They'll start asking questions." A bellboy walking by heard a loud thump, then silence. By noon, Mr. Owen was seen leaving the elevator, headed toward the lobby payphones. He made 2 short calls, one to someone named Don, the other to a number that didn't exist in the hotel directory. No one knows what was said. He returned to room 1046 and locked the door. Chapter 5. Blood on the Handle. January 5th. A switchboard operator reported that the phone in 1046 had been off the hook for hours. A bellboy was sent to check. The door was locked. He knocked. A weak voice called out from inside. "Come in." "You need to hang up the phone, sir," the boy called back. "We can't ring the room." "I can't?" the voice rasped. When security arrived and opened the door with the master key, They found Mr. Owen on the floor, naked, covered in blood. The phone cord had been yanked from the wall. The lamp was shattered. A chair was overturned. The sheets were soaked in red, and yet the man was still breathing. A detective on the scene would later write, "It was the quietest murder I have ever seen." It wasn't rage. It was method. Owen's last words were strange. "Nobody killed me. I fell. I hit my head. I want to die." He was taken to the hospital. He died that night. Chapter 6. The man called Detective Frank Laird had seen his share of strange crime scenes in Kansas City: liquor wars, railroad brawls, gamblers tossed out of second-story windows. But nothing like Room. The door had been locked from the inside. No weapon found. No fingerprints but the victim's. No signs of robbery. And a victim who seemed more afraid of the truth than of death itself. Laird lit a cigarette over the body. Now lying stiff in the hospital morgue, the doctors had done their best, but blood loss and trauma had chewed away any chance of recovery. Laird studied the wounds. Blunt force trauma to the skull, stab wounds in the chest, deep, deliberate, and, here's the strange part, all inflicted hours before anyone heard a sound. The victim had bled in silence. Alone. Or worse, not alone. The night nurse, a sweet slip of a girl named Eleanor, had taken his last words. Laird flipped through his notebook. He kept saying, "Dawn will know," over and over. Dawn knows. He told me not to talk. Dawn told me I had to wait here. He's coming back. Dawn, Dawn. But there was no Dawn listed in the register. No visitor logs, no calls traced. Whoever Dawn was, he was a ghost. The autopsy revealed something stranger. In the lining of the man's stomach, the coroner found a small, undigested scrap of paper. It had been swallowed shortly before death. Burned around the edges, barely legible. Room 6. Don't trust the mirrors. Laird had it sealed in evidence. He'd seen code phrases before, working special investigations back in '31. This smelled like gang work, or worse. The hotel president had long been rumored to be a quiet, neutral zone between factions. Unofficial truces were held there. Information passed in silence. You didn't ask questions in the president. But this was something else. Laird returned to the room that night, long after the body had been removed. The walls were cold, silent. A thin strip of dried blood still ran beneath the desk. He stared at the mirror on the west wall. It looked normal. Just an old, oxidized pane bolted into the plaster. But when he stepped closer, something caught his eye, etched into the corner of the glass, almost invisible unless you leaned in close. Tiny initials, RTO, and beneath them, a date, 2 years before the man ever checked in. Chapter 7. The mirror in rooms. Detective Laird couldn't sleep. He sat in his apartment on the west side. Window cracked open to the night wind. The city outside still hummed with the jazz age's dying breath, horns echoing from clubs in the garment district, a rumble of trains rolling past the stockyards. But none of it mattered tonight. His mind was anchored to the mirror. Room 1046 was one thing, but there hadn't been a room 6 at the hotel president for years. He went back to the hotel before dawn. The front desk clerk, Keene, was on duty again. His eyes looked sunken, darker than usual. "Detective," he nodded. "I heard the man died." "He did," Laird said. "I need to see your floor plan. From before the renovations." Keene hesitated. "That's the original blueprint?" "Basement archives." "I'll wait." It took nearly 40 minutes, but Keene returned with a rolled-up map bound in brittle twine. Laird unrolled it across the counter. Room 1046 was clearly marked. So was but down on the first floor, near a corner behind what was now a boiler closet, sat a small, windowless room labeled Room 6, inactive. "Do not assign. No guests assigned here in over a decade," Keene said. The room was sealed after, well, there was an incident. Rumors. Laird narrowed his eyes. What kind of incident? Keene dropped his voice. They say a woman jumped from the roof, but she wasn't a guest. She lived here, worked in the hotel during the war, housekeeping. Everyone said she was sweet, quiet. Then one day she just cracked. Cracked? They found her walking barefoot on the second floor, covered in blood. Not hers. Holding a mirror. Laird demanded to see it. The maintenance foreman, a Polish veteran named Lasko, agreed to take him. They moved through the service corridors beneath the lobby, past rusted water tanks and old furnace valves. Everything smelled like iron and mildew. Room 6? Nobody asks about room 6, Lasko muttered, unlocking a small steel door tucked behind an old wine rack. But sometimes you hear things. Laird turned his head. Like what? Knocking, tapping. Even when it's empty. The room was small, barely 10 feet by 10. The walls were painted over, but the original floral wallpaper showed through in peeling strips. A cracked wash basin stood in the corner. A rusted bed frame lay against the wall, and across from it, a full-length mirror, tarnished, cloudy. Laird stepped toward it. His reflection looked wrong. The proportions felt off. His face slightly elongated, his coat darker than it was. When he raised his hand to his face, his reflection didn't move in sync. It lagged by a fraction of a second. He leaned closer. There, etched into the upper right corner of the mirror, nearly faded with time, was the same signature, RT, 2 years before his death. In a room that no longer existed. Later that day, he interviewed Mary Soptic again, the maid. She sat on the edge of the chair, hands tight in her lap. I remember something strange, she whispered. That second morning. Go on. When I cleaned the room, the mirror had been covered. But when I came back later that day, it was uncovered, except it wasn't the same mirror. Laird frowned. What do you mean? The reflection was brighter than the room, like a different light source. I looked and I swear I saw another person, standing just behind Mr. Owen. Only, he wasn't in the room. Laird closed his notebook. He needed to get that mirror out of room 6 and find out exactly who Roland T. Owen really was and what had brought him to Kansas City to die. Alone, terrified, and begging someone named Don for help. Chapter 8. 3 cigarettes and a fingerprint. January 6th, Kansas City Police Department. Detective Frank Laird sat at his desk with 3 items laid out before him. A bent cigarette with smudged lipstick on the filter. A silver fountain pen engraved with the initials DW. A photograph, grainy, time-warped, of Roland T. Owen sitting at the edge of a bathtub, head bowed, body bruised. Shot from behind, not from any official record. All 3 were found during the second sweep of room 1046. All 3 were missed by the initial team. The pen was lodged behind a floorboard. The cigarette had been dropped near the vent, as if tossed in a hurry. The photograph was the most troubling. It had been folded into a copy of the Kansas City Star, slipped beneath the dresser lining. Someone had been in the room. Someone besides Roland. The fingerprint came that evening. The lab tech, Gerald Klein, buzzed his office with barely contained breathlessness. We got a partial, he said. From the pen, not Roland's. And it's a match. To who? Klein hesitated. Problem is, it's from a sealed file. Federal. Marked confidential, State Bureau. Laird went still. Name? Dorothy W. Hardin. Age 24. Disappeared 1933. Last seen in Kansas City. That name rang a bell. 2 years ago, there had been whispers, a chambermaid who went missing from a downtown hotel. Rumor said she was involved with a city councilman, pregnant, disposed of. Her body was never found. But the initials, DWH, on the pen now sat beside a man who'd never existed until 2 weeks ago, who checked in without a past and left only blood and riddles behind. Laird flipped open the morgue's photo records. Dorothy Hardin's file was thin. 1 photo, studio portrait, black curls, soft jaw, distant smile, pale. Then he flipped to the hospital intake form for Roland T. Owen. In the emergency contact section, handwritten in faint pencil, it read, Notified, D. Harden, 4145 Vesper Street, no phone. That address was 5 blocks from the hotel. He grabbed his coat. Vesper Street had not seen repair in decades. The houses were skeletal. Burned-out windows, rusted fences, children with dirty cheeks watching from doorways. House 4114 was boarded up, but not vacant. There were signs, disturbed snow, fresh footprints, a curtain pulled taut in the attic window. Laird stepped onto the porch and knocked. Silence, then movement. A floorboard creak. He knocked again, louder. Kansas City Police. A voice, trembling. You need to go. You weren't supposed to come. The door opened a sliver. A woman stood behind it. Her hair was dark, her eyes shadowed and glassy, but unmistakably the woman from the photo, Dorothy W. Harden. I read the paper, she said. He's dead, isn't he? Laird nodded. Tell me who he was. She looked past him, down the street. You won't believe me. Try me. The story came in pieces. Dorothy had met Roland, whose real name she never learned, at the train station in Omaha, summer of '33. He was kind, quiet, and on the run. From who, she didn't know, but he carried strange ideas. He said he was being watched through hotel mirrors. That codes were embedded in elevator music. That a man named Don was orchestrating something big, something invisible. At first, she thought he was paranoid. Then, people began following them. A bellhop in Wichita asked her about a signal. A woman in a red coat stared at her for an hour without blinking in a diner in Tulsa. Their hotel phone would ring once, then stop, over and over. No voice, just silence. They split up in Kansas City. He said he needed to go dark. He would check into a hotel, create a false identity, and wait. Wait for what? Laird asked. For room 6, she whispered. Part 2. The voice behind the wall. Present day. Chapter 9. The box inside the wall. September 12th, Kansas City, Missouri. The President Hotel had been many things. A 1930s luxury escape. A war-era safe house. A cocktail-slick jazz haven. Then, for 50 years, a neglected relic full of creaking pipes, water damage, and memories no one wanted to talk about. Now it was something else again. Reborn, sterilized, rebranded as a boutique destination, with brushed steel elevators, Edison bulbs, and minimalist decor. The Atlas Downtown. A name that said nothing and promised everything. Ava Weaver hated it. Not the building, she loved the bones, the echoes, but the branding. She was a preservationist by degree, but a podcaster by trade. Her show, Forgotten Rooms, told stories of places that remembered more than people did. She'd been invited by the renovation crew to document weird findings during the gutting of the East Wing. What she found wasn't just weird, it was impossible. Behind the plaster of room 1046's adjacent wall, workers had uncovered a sealed wooden box embedded between beams. The contractor, a local veteran named Mike, called her in. It's not on the blueprint, he said, frowning at the cavity, like someone stuffed it in after the drywall went up in the '60s. But the box looks older. It was carved from walnut, bound with tarnished brass, and locked with a mechanism that looked like it belonged on a bank vault. The initials carved into the lid read, RTO. Eva's fingers trembled as she touched the edge. It had been weeks since she'd thought about room 1046. A cold case, unsolved since 1935. A body with no past. A name that led nowhere. A locked door and a whisper. Dawn will know. Now here it was again. Literally built into the walls. They opened it in her apartment that night. Inside, wrapped in wax paper and string, a silver cigarette case with an engraving, "For the night that never ends." A stack of photographs, hotel rooms, women at windows, reflections in mirrors, a sealed envelope labeled, "To be opened only if I'm found dead," and an old, heavy cassette tape dated 9/12/1987. 36 years ago to the day, Ava plugged it into a refurbished stereo deck. The sound was warped, aged, but present. A voice, metallic and slow, spoke over a faint hum. "This is Roland T. Owen. If you're hearing this, the mirror found you. Dawn is still alive." A burst of static. Then a whisper. "Check room 6. They never closed it. Just changed the name." The tape clicked off. Ava stared at the wall. Her apartment was directly beneath what used to be room 1046. The new numbering had changed everything. But if she was right, the room across the hall, now listed as Suite 2106, would align perfectly with the space once called Room 6. And suddenly, her own mirror, tall, modern, and nailed into the drywall, felt colder, like something was watching from the other side. Chapter 10. Suite. Ava stood outside Suite 2106, with her phone flashlight and a borrowed master keycard she wasn't supposed to have. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Carpet muffled her steps, and the overhead lights buzzed with an inconsistent flicker like old film. The door was unremarkable, beige brushed metal, faux brass number plate. But she'd checked the hotel's original blueprint files that morning. Suite 2006 aligned perfectly with what had once been Room 6. The tape's voice still echoed in her head. They never closed it, just changed the name. She unlocked the door. Inside was a room too modern to trust. The walls were bone white, the curtains fake linen. A half bottle of Fiji water stood untouched on the side table, but the geometry was off. Ava's instincts, sharpened by years of walking buildings built before modern symmetry, told her something had been adjusted. Walls that didn't align with the floor plan, angles that didn't match the ceiling lines. And there it was, the mirror, tall, built into the wall, seamless. The same dimensions as the one described in the 1935 police files. The same placement across from where a bed would have been. Only now it was sleek, updated, but it had never been replaced, just framed over. Eva stepped closer, raised her phone light. Her reflection stared back, subtle distortions hidden behind the clarity. Her eyes seemed darker in the mirror, her mouth slightly parted, though she was sure she'd kept it closed. And in the corner, faintly scratched into the silvered glass, RTO 9. She stumbled back. Her pulse raced. She grabbed her bag and snapped a photo, but the reflection didn't appear in the shot. It just showed an empty room, no mirror at all. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A private number. No caller ID. She hesitated, then answered. A click, then static. Then a familiar voice. "They're watching. Room 6 is still open. Still listening." Then silence. She stared at the screen. The call had lasted just 6 seconds. Back in her apartment, Ava pulled the tape out again and examined the label. 9/12/1987. The date of the Max Headroom broadcast hijacking in Chicago. She dug into the archives. Newspaper clippings, FCC reports, technician interviews. The phrases were eerily similar to Owen's final words. "It's Dawn. He's behind it. He told me to wait. The mirror is a receiver. He'll come back. The signal has to continue." And one technician, Gerald Phelps, had filed a private memo to his boss days later. Ava found it in an online scan of a forgotten microfilm article. It read, "This wasn't a prank. Someone used the static. They embedded something inside the frequency. I heard whispering, a number, a name, Roland T. Owen." Ava sat back, hands trembling. How could a man from 1935 appear in a signal hijacking unless he'd never really died? Unless he wasn't just a victim, but a messenger. Chapter 11. Paper Walls and Shadow Names. January, Kansas City, Missouri. Dorothy Hardin lit a cigarette with hands that shook. She sat across from Laird in the back corner of Delano's cafe, the lights low and the windows fogged from kitchen steam. Outside, the cold wind clawed at the glass, but in here they were safe for now. "I lied about how I met him," she said softly. "It wasn't at the station." Laird leaned forward. "Where then?" "In a house. A very old house." in Clay County. I was called there to clean day work. The man who lived there didn't speak, but he had a mirror in every room, covered in cloth. When I lifted one, even just for dusting, I saw him standing behind me. Roland? She nodded. But he wasn't in the room. Not yet. He arrived later. Through the front door, like the mirror had sent a warning. Laird pressed for details. She hesitated, then wrote something on a napkin. I've never told anyone this, she whispered. That house, it's not just old. It's wrong. Every room echoes differently. The clocks don't tick in sync. There's no dust, but no one lives there. Who owns it? She shrugged. I asked once. The man who hired me said only, Don handles the keys. That name again. Don. Laird tucked the address into his coat. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in patterns. And this name, this Don, kept surfacing like oil on water. That night, he returned to room 6. Alone. The hotel was quiet. The staff had learned not to ask why Laird kept coming back. The mirror greeted him like a secret. He set down his case file and walked the perimeter of the room. He tapped the walls, hollow, thicker on the left side. He pressed his ear to the mirror. Nothing. Then a faint sound. A whine, like distant radio static. Not from the room, from inside the glass. Laird's breath hitched. He knocked once, instinctively. Something knocked back. 3 slow, soft raps. He stumbled away, eyes wide, sweat running down his collar. The air was colder now. And on the bed frame, freshly scratched into the wood since his last visit. Tell Dorothy to stop looking. Tell her Don is watching. He left in a hurry. Back at the station, he pulled the full hotel guest logs from December and January. He cross-referenced every guest on the 10th floor. Only one name showed up more than once. D.S. Renner checked in twice. Different rooms, paid in cash. He traced the address, a P.O. box rented by Donald S. Renner, retired war clerk. No known employment, no family. Except in 1928, Don Renner had been a psychiatric patient at the St. Joseph Sanitarium. His file, confidential yellowed, was still on record. One note stood out. Subject believes mirrors are entry points to an alternate plane. Claims he is not alone in reflection. Speaks to his own image. Demands all portals be sealed. Refers to unseen companion as... Laird's hands went cold. The name Roland T. Owen wasn't just a false identity. It was a role. Chapter 12, The House Without Dust. January 9, North Clay County, Missouri. The road to Thorn Hollow was long, unpaved and half forgotten by the city's memory. Detective Laird had to stop twice to check the hand-drawn map. Dorothy had given him. It wasn't on any standard chart. Trees lined the road like silent mourners. The January air froze in his lungs. No birds, no tracks in the snow, only his tires crushing ice and old leaves. Then, through a break in the trees, the house appeared. 3 stories tall, Victorian, covered in blackened ivy. No visible wires, no mail slot. A roof gable with a shattered window, like a watchful eye, cracked but still open. He stepped out of the car and immediately knew. This house remembered things. The porch groaned beneath his weight. The door wasn't locked. It opened with a soft sigh. Inside, the smell was wrong. Not rot, not mildew, but absence. Like nothing had happened here in decades. No cooking, no breath, no time. Yet there was no dust. Furniture was arranged neatly. A leather chair beside a fireplace with cold logs. A grandfather clock ticking, but not in rhythm with the watch in his pocket. 2 pendulums out of phase. He stepped into the hallway. Mirrors hung in every room, framed in wood or iron, some cracked, others covered, each one slightly fogged, as if someone had just breathed on it. He passed a wall lined with photographs, black and white portraits of men and women, their eyes blurred or scratched out. No names, just dates. Some as recent as 1933, others older than the house itself. Then he heard the tapping, soft, precise, rhythmic, 3 knocks, from upstairs. He drew his revolver, though instinct told him bullets wouldn't matter in this place. The staircase moaned underfoot. At the top landing, a long hallway stretched left and right. Doors lined both sides, but only one was open. A mirror glowed faintly within. He entered. The attic room was empty, except for one thing. A full-length mirror with a brass frame, identical to the one in room 6. Only this one had no reflection.
Not distorted, not fogged, just empty.
He stood in front of it. His reflection didn't appear. Instead, slowly the glass began to shimmer like water touched by wind. Then an image surfaced. A hotel room, small, bare. A man sat on the bed, face in his hands, bloody, silent. It was Roland, no worse. It was Laird, his own face, but not his expression. This version of himself was afraid, wounded, and behind him, in the reflection's mirror within the mirror, stood another man, face in shadow, tall, thin. Watch, and then text appeared across the surface of the mirror, as though typed by an invisible machine. You are now inside room 6. Tell Dorothy to stop. Don is listening. Laird stumbled back. The room behind him was now dark. He turned to run, but the hallway had vanished. Only more mirrors lined the path now. Each one showed a different version of himself, aging, bleeding, gone mad. In one, he was hanging from the rafters. In another, he was writing something in blood on the wall. In all of them, Dawn stood behind him, silent, waiting. Laird awoke outside, lying in the snow beside his car. It was morning. No sign of footprints, no tire marks. But the key was in the ignition, and the photograph of Dorothy was folded in his coat pocket with new handwriting on the back. A message in red ink. She opened the wrong door. You have one left. Chapter 13. The Reflection Delay. The cassette tape still sat on Ava's desk, rewound to the beginning, as if daring her to play it again. But she hadn't. Not yet. Since returning from Suite 2006, she hadn't slept. The photos were spread across her kitchen table in neat rows, each one a glimpse into someplace wrong. Hotel rooms with mirrors positioned identically, always across from the bed. Reflections that didn't match the lighting. People caught mid-blink, their mirror versions staring straight at the camera. There were at least 3 different women who appeared in multiple photos across different decades, each time slightly older, each time next to the same mirror, and one man in the background. Always there, never in focus, just tall enough, just enough shadow to leave a shape that didn't belong. She sat down and opened her laptop. Her research was growing messy. The name Roland T. Owen had been flagged in newspaper archives again, this time in a bizarre article from 1969, a woman claiming she'd seen a man in her hotel mirror speaking to someone who wasn't there. She had checked out the next morning and died in a car accident 2 miles away. The witness report had been attached to a police file about disturbing hallucinations tied to room 6113 in a now demolished hotel in St. Louis. Ava clicked through older podcasts and scanned her own notes. There were connections she hadn't seen before, mentions of strange interference, phantom reflections, people who stopped appearing in photographs after visiting certain places. It was a pattern so faint she might have missed it, but now she couldn't unsee it. She stood and crossed to her own mirror. Full length, flush with the wall, bought from a boutique that specialized in reclaimed hotel furnishings. Her reflection met her gaze. Subtle rings under her eyes, tired hair, a slight slouch she didn't realize until now. She raised her hand. So did the reflection. Perfectly timed. Then she blinked. The reflection didn't. A chill crawled down her back. She blinked again and again. Each time, the reflection lagged, just a fraction of a second behind. Ava stepped away, heart pounding. From behind her, something groaned faintly, like pressure against a wooden beam. She turned. Nothing moved, but she heard it again. A low, groaning creak as if something inside the wall had shifted. She grabbed her phone and opened the audio recorder. She pressed it close to the mirror, held her breath, and listened. At first, nothing. Just room tone. Then static. Faint. Layered. A whisper threading in and out. Still listening, she yanked the phone away. The waveform spiked. She played it back, but the recording was blank. Only white noise. Ava backed away slowly, keeping the mirror in sight. She returned to her laptop and brought up the digitized cassette. If the mirror was transmitting something, then the tape might be the key to decoding it. She opened her sound editing software, isolated the background frequencies, and started to enhance the layers. There, beneath the main voice, a rhythm. A low signal almost like Morse code, but not quite. She slowed it down. Something emerged. A sequence. She had no idea what it meant. Dot, dot, pause. Pulse. 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 Dot. Long tone. She amplified it. Room 6 was never a room. It was a boundary. The tape's voice returned, but this time she heard something she had missed before. Just after the phrase, "Dawn is still alive," a second voice whispered something over the final burst of static. The mirror shimmered. The light in her apartment dimmed suddenly, like the power surged, but just in the living room. The digital clock on her microwave reset. Her phone blinked out. The phrase hit like a slap. A boundary. Between what? And then faint and impossible to miss. Not a reflection, a surface ripple, like heat on pavement. 3 slow knocks. From the other side. Chapter 14. The Quiet Ones. Laird sat with Dorothy in the old greenhouse behind the boarding house where she now stayed. She didn't like to be indoors anymore. Not since the mirrors started moving. The glass panes above them were cracked and fogged from inside, filtering the weak January light into pale gray ribbons that shimmered on her skin. She smoked slowly, wordlessly. Laird waited. He'd learned by now that silence was a language of its own in this investigation. Dorothy nodded, but didn't look at him. "You said he was using a false name," he finally said. "Roland. But you also said he'd been running from something." "I don't think he was running," she said. "I think he was hiding something. Something inside him." He stared at her. Laird frowned. "You mean a secret?" "No." She glanced up. "I mean, someone. Not in so many words. He was afraid of Dawn. Obsessed. Really. But I think Dawn was afraid of him too." "I know how it sounds," she said quickly. "But he told me things about voices he could only hear through glass, about faces that weren't his, but wore his skin. He said room 6 wasn't a room at all. It was where people went when they were meant to disappear." "He said that?" Dorothy exhaled smoke through her nose. "He told me there were others. They don't speak. They don't blink. They live behind the silver. He called them the Quiet Ones." "What else did he say?" Laird felt the air tighten. "The Quiet Ones?" She nodded. "They listen. That's all they do. And if you listen long enough, they find you. They whisper things, tell you what to do, where to go, who to trust." Laird felt his stomach turn. And he believed this? She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. It was yellowed, stiff, and warm, as if it had been kept too close to the body for too long. "I think," she said softly, "he was one of them. Or becoming one." She handed it to him. It was a drawing. He unfolded it slowly. A crude map, lines intersecting, dotted arrows, numbers along the margins. At the center, a box marked simply, and just above it, written in small, shaking script, "Boundary Protocol. Observation must not exceed 6 minutes. Echo exposure irreversible. Mirrors must remain sealed." "What the hell is this?" Dorothy looked away. It was inside his jacket. The night he died. Laird folded the paper and stood. He didn't say anything for a long time. "I need you to stay with someone I trust. Don't go back to your place. Don't speak to anyone. If someone knocks and doesn't blink, don't answer." Dorothy's face paled. You believe me now? He nodded. I think I'm starting to. As he walked away, she called after him. He turned. When you go back to room 6, don't look at your reflection. No matter what it shows you, one more thing. He left without answering, but he already knew it was too late. He'd seen himself in the mirror at Thorn Hollow, and the version of himself inside it was smiling. Chapter 15. The Man Who Never Aired Again. The next morning, Ava called every Gerald Phelps she could find. There were 5 in the Kansas City area, 3 of whom were deceased, and 1 who answered only to Jerry and hung up the moment she asked about television. The 5th match was listed as Gerald Phelps Jr., but that led her to a small storage company out past Independence, Missouri. She drove out early, the cassette tape sealed in a padded case on the passenger seat. Traffic thinned the farther she got from the city, until it was just her frost-laced fields and bare trees clawing at the sky. The storage office was a squat brick building with faded blue signage and a flag that hadn't been replaced since. Inside, a man in his 60s leaned over a counter, hunched and pale, with nicotine-yellow fingers and a hearing aid he kept fiddling with. "Mr. Phelps?" she asked. The man didn't answer right away. He stared at her chest, not with interest, but with a look that suggested he was searching for something beneath her skin. "I know why you're here," he said quietly. Ava stiffened. "You do? I figured someone would come eventually. You're the 3rd one in 40 years. 3rd what?" He glanced over his shoulder, then motioned her into the back. They walked past boxes, old monitors, tubes of coaxial cable, and shelves of vintage VHS tapes, labeled in shaky handwriting, WGN 87, static arcs, channel split. At the far end was a door with a keypad. He entered a code without letting her see. Inside was a small, insulated room lined with egg crate foam. A reel-to-reel sat in the corner next to a vintage signal decoder and what looked like a cobbled-together oscilloscope, humming faintly even though it wasn't plugged in. "I used to be an engineer," he said. "Signal control for WGN, then freelance. I was in the booth the night the hijack happened." He nodded, saw it, heard it, tried to trace it, but it didn't come from outside. Didn't come from inside either. "Then where? You saw it?" He looked at her, tired. "It came from between." Ava didn't understand. "I made a copy," he said. "I wasn't supposed to, but the sound, I knew it wasn't just audio. There was something inside it." Phelps turned, pulled a cassette from a drawer, and placed it beside hers. Nearly identical. Same handwriting. Same date. Like what? Like a signal trying to carry thought. Not words. Not speech. More like an idea. Or a presence. He clicked on a portable player and loaded his version of the tape. The same warped voice began. But this time, Ava heard something new. "This is Roland T. Owen. If you're hearing this, the mirror found you." Overlapping channels, not just one voice, but many, layered under the words crying, tapping, whispers. One voice rose above the rest, smooth and calm. Phelps stopped the tape. "Dawn is watching." Then silence. "I've seen things," he said. "In screens, in mirrors, faces that don't belong to anyone." Ava looked down. "Who is Dawn?" He shook his head. "Not a person. Not exactly. Dawn's a name they give it. Whoever started the original loop. The first signal. The one that never ended. Some say it started in 1935. Others say it's older, but it always begins with a room. A man with no past. A mirror that doesn't reflect you. Loop." He turned to her. "And someone on the other side who wants in." Ava stared at the reel-to-reel machine. "What happens if they get through?" "They already have." Let's return to 1935, where Detective Laird, now shaken, obsessed, and changed, prepares to confront the very heart of the mystery. Room 6 is no longer a place. It is a threshold, and he's about to step across it for the last time. Phelps smiled, thin and sad. Detective Laird had not slept since Thorn Hollow. Chapter 16. What you bring with you. His hands trembled even when still. Shadows moved at the corners of his vision and never left. The photographs on his wall, case evidence, witness files, press clippings, shifted subtly each morning. Faces blurred, ink faded in strange patterns. He kept rewinding the interview with Dorothy in his head, repeating the words, "Don handles the keys." By the night of January 10th, he knew what he had to do. Room 6 had become a presence in his life. It wasn't just inside the hotel anymore. It followed him. In reflections, in dreams, in places where there were no mirrors, but somehow it still watched. He told no one, left no note. He checked into the hotel president under a false name, chose a room on the same floor as 1046, brought nothing but his notebook, his service revolver, and Dorothy's map. At midnight, he walked to the staff corridor, passed through the service door, and descended the narrow staircase to the sealed hallway where room 6 had once stood. But tonight, the door was unlocked. Inside, the room was waiting. It swung inward, silently. It hadn't changed. Same warped walls, same cracked mirror, same dustless silence. But the air was heavier now. The mirror gave off no reflection at all, only a surface of faint smoke, like ice breathing. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Immediately, the sound changed. No more city noise, no hum of electricity, just the tick of an invisible clock somewhere deep behind the walls. He looked at the mirror, then down at the note Dorothy had given him. Observation must not exceed 6 minutes. He set his pocket watch and turned to face the glass. Then, movement, nothing, a shape, rising behind the fog, slowly forming. The reflection was older, scarred, eyes sunken. It wore the same coat, but inside out. Its hands were folded, and its mouth opened soundlessly. Himself, but not quite. Then came a second shape behind him, tall, narrow, pale-faced, no longer a mystery, no longer a whisper. Don. Don stood still, his face blank, except for a faint smile. Then the reflection changed. Now Laird was sitting, tied to a chair. There, beneath the main voice, a rhythm, a low signal almost like Morse code, but not quite. She slowed it down. Something emerged. A sequence. Dot, dot, pause. Pulse. 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 Dot. Long tone. She had no idea what it meant. The tape's voice returned, but this time she heard something she had missed before. Just after the phrase, "Dawn is still alive," a second voice whispered something over the final burst of static. She amplified it. Room 6 was never a room. It was a boundary. The phrase hit like a slap. A boundary. Between what? The light in her apartment dimmed suddenly, like the power surged, but just in the living room. The digital clock on her microwave reset. Her phone blinked out. The mirror shimmered. Not a reflection, a surface ripple, like heat on pavement. And then, faint and impossible to miss, 3 slow knocks. From the other side, Chapter 14, The Quiet Ones. Laird sat with Dorothy in the old greenhouse behind the boarding house where she now stayed. She didn't like to be indoors anymore. Not since the mirrors started moving. The glass panes above them were cracked and fogged from inside, filtering the weak January light into pale gray ribbons that shimmered on her skin. She smoked slowly, wordlessly. Laird waited. He'd learned by now that silence was a language of its own in this investigation. "You said he was using a false name," he finally said. "Roland. But you also said he'd been running from something." Dorothy nodded, but didn't look at him. "I don't think he was running," she said. "I think he was hiding something. Something inside him." Laird frowned. "You mean a secret?" "No." She glanced up. "I mean, someone." He stared at her. "I know how it sounds," she said quickly, "but he told me things about voices he could only hear through glass, about faces that weren't his, but wore his skin. He said room 6 wasn't a room at all. It was where people went when they were meant to disappear." "He said that?" "Not in so many words. He was afraid of Dawn. Obsessed, really. But I think Dawn was afraid of him too." Laird felt the air tighten. What else did he say? Dorothy exhaled smoke through her nose. He told me there were others. They don't speak. They don't blink. They live behind the silver. He called them the quiet ones. The quiet ones? She nodded. They listen. That's all they do. And if you listen long enough, they find you. They whisper things, tell you what to do, where to go, who to trust. Laird felt his stomach turn. And he believed this? I think, she said softly. He was one of them. Or becoming one. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. It was yellowed, stiff, and warm, as if it had been kept too close to the body for too long. She handed it to him. He unfolded it slowly. It was a drawing, a crude map, lines intersecting, dotted arrows, numbers along the margins. At the center, a box marked simply X, and just above it, written in small, shaking script, Boundary Protocol. Observation must not exceed 6 minutes. Echo exposure irreversible. Mirrors must remain sealed. What the hell is this? Dorothy looked away. It was inside his jacket. The night he died. Laird folded the paper and stood. He didn't say anything for a long time. I need you to stay with someone I trust. Don't go back to your place. Don't speak to anyone. If someone knocks and doesn't blink, don't answer. Dorothy's face paled. You believe me now? He nodded. I think I'm starting to. As he walked away, she called after him. One more thing. He turned. When you go back to room 6, don't look at your reflection. No matter what it shows you. He left without answering, but he already knew it was too late. He'd seen himself in the mirror at Thorn Hollow, and the version of himself inside it was smiling. Chapter 15. The Man Who Never Aired Again. The next morning, Ava called every Gerald Phelps she could find. There were 5 in the Kansas City area, 3 of whom were deceased, and 1 who answered only to Jerry and hung up the moment she asked about television. The 5th match was listed as Gerald Phelps Jr., but that led her to a small storage company out past Independence, Missouri. She drove out early, the cassette tape sealed in a padded case on the passenger seat. Traffic thinned the farther she got from the city, until it was just her frost-laced fields and bare trees clawing at the sky. The storage office was a squat brick building with faded blue signage and a flag that hadn't been replaced since. Inside, a man in his 60s leaned over a counter, hunched and pale, with nicotine-yellow fingers and a hearing aid he kept fiddling with. Mr. Phelps? She asked. The man didn't answer right away. He stared at her chest, not with interest, but with a look that suggested he was searching for something beneath her skin. I know why you're here, he said quietly. Ava stiffened. You do? I figured someone would come eventually. You're the 3rd one in 40 years. 3rd what? He glanced over his shoulder, then motioned her into the back. They walked past boxes, old monitors, tubes of coaxial cable, and shelves of vintage VHS tapes, labeled in shaky handwriting, WGN 87, static arcs, channel split. At the far end was a door with a keypad. He entered a code without letting her see. Inside was a small, insulated room lined with egg crate foam. A reel-to-reel sat in the corner next to a vintage signal decoder and what looked like a cobbled-together oscilloscope, humming faintly even though it wasn't plugged in. I used to be an engineer, he said. Signal control for WGN, then freelance. I was in the booth the night the hijack happened. You saw it? He nodded. Saw it, heard it, tried to trace it, but it didn't come from outside. Didn't come from inside either. Then where? He looked at her, tired. It came from between. Ava didn't understand. Phelps turned, pulled a cassette from a drawer, and placed it beside hers. Nearly identical. Same handwriting. Same date. I made a copy, he said. I wasn't supposed to, but the sound, I knew it wasn't just audio. There was something inside it. Like what? Like a signal trying to carry thought. Not words, not speech. More like an idea, or a presence. He clicked on a portable player and loaded his version of the tape. The same warped voice began. This is Roland T. Owen. If you're hearing this, The mirror found you. But this time, Ava heard something new. Overlapping channels, not just one voice, but many, layered under the words crying, tapping, whispers. One voice rose above the rest, smooth and calm. Dawn is watching. Then silence. Phelps stopped the tape. I've seen things, he said. In screens, in mirrors, faces that don't belong to anyone. Ava looked down. Who is Dawn? He shook his head. Not a person. Not exactly. Dawn's a name they give it. Whoever started the original loop. Loop, the first signal. The one that never ended. Some say it started in 1935. Others say it's older, but it always begins with a room. A man with no past. A mirror that doesn't reflect you. He turned to her. And someone on the other side who wants in. Ava stared at the reel-to-reel machine. What happens if they get through? Phelps smiled, thin and sad. They already have. Let's return to 1935, where Detective Laird, now shaken, obsessed, and changed, prepares to confront the very heart of the mystery. Room 6 is no longer a place. It is a threshold, and he's about to step across it for the last time. Chapter 16. What you bring with you. Detective Laird had not slept since Thorn Hollow. His hands trembled even when still. Shadows moved at the corners of his vision and never left. The photographs on his wall, case evidence, witness files, press clippings, shifted subtly each morning. Faces blurred, ink faded in strange patterns. He kept rewinding the interview with Dorothy in his head, repeating the words, "Dawn handles the keys." Room 6 had become a presence in his life. It wasn't just inside the hotel anymore. It followed him. In reflections, in dreams, in places where there were no mirrors, but somehow it still watched. By the night of January 10th, he knew what he had to do. He told no one, left no note. He checked into the hotel president under a false name, chose a room on the same floor as 1046, brought nothing but his notebook, his service revolver, and Dorothy's map. At midnight, he walked to the staff corridor, passed through the service door, and descended the narrow staircase to the sealed hallway where room 6 had once stood. But tonight, the door was unlocked. It swung inward, silently. Inside, the room was waiting. It hadn't changed. Same warped walls, same cracked mirror, same dustless silence. But the air was heavier now. The mirror gave off no reflection at all, only a surface of faint smoke, like ice breathing. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Immediately, the sound changed. No more city noise, no hum of electricity, just the tick of an invisible clock somewhere deep behind the walls. He looked at the mirror, then down at the note Dorothy had given him. Observation must not exceed 6 minutes. He set his pocket watch and turned to face the glass. Nothing. Then, movement, a shape, rising behind the fog, slowly forming, himself. But not quite. The reflection was older, scarred, eyes sunken. It wore the same coat, but inside out. Its hands were folded, and its mouth opened soundlessly. Then came a second shape behind him, tall, narrow, pale-faced. Dawn, no longer a mystery, no longer a whisper. Dawn stood still, his face blank, except for a faint smile. Then the reflection changed. Now Laird was sitting, tied to a chair, writing in blood on the wall behind him. Tell the next one. The signal never ends. The surface of the mirror rippled like water, and then cold fingers touched Laird's shoulder. He spun, gun drawn. No one there. But the mirror now showed the other side of the room, the one he wasn't standing in, the one that shouldn't exist. Another version of room 6, inverted, and something inside it was moving toward the glass. He raised his gun, fired once. The bullet hit the mirror and passed through like smoke, and then he was gone. At dawn, the hotel staff found the door to room 6 standing open. The room was empty. No mirror, no man. Just a note left in a cracked leather notebook on the floor, written in frantic script. I've seen what's waiting. It wears our faces. It walks through walls. It listens in glass. The next will be a woman. She will find the box. Tell her not to follow. Tell her to leave it sealed. Signed, F. Laird. Date, January. Time, 6 minutes exactly. We'll continue with Ava in 2023, just hours after her encounter with Gerald Phelps and his chilling words, "They already have." Ava is now more determined and more frightened than ever. She has the cassette, the photographs, the mirror, and now something new, a hidden notebook, lost for nearly a century, containing the final words of Detective Frank Laird. Chapter 17, 6 minutes. Ava's apartment had gone cold overnight. The heat was on, the windows sealed. Nothing should have changed. But the air felt wrong, thinner, like it had been exhaled by someone no longer in the room. She wrapped herself in a sweatshirt and sat cross-legged on the floor in front of the mirror. Her laptop sat open beside her. The digital waveform of the cassette was frozen on screen. She hadn't played it again. Not since the knock. She knew something was inside now. Maybe not a person, maybe not even alive, but present. Watching. At sunrise, she returned to the mirror. It had fogged slightly overnight, despite the fact that no steam, no moisture, nothing in the room should have caused it. She ran a gloved finger across the surface, clearing a patch in the center. Something scratched back from the other side. She jumped. Tiny lines began to form in the glass, like fingers dragging symbols across a frozen window pane. Letters. Shaky. Reversed. She held her phone up to mirror the image and read it aloud. 6 minutes. She stumbled backward, knocking over her laptop. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. No caller ID. She didn't answer. Just listened. Click. Static. A voice. Male, distant. Not Roland. Not Dawn. Different. You found the book. She froze. You shouldn't have opened it. The call ended. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't own a book. Not from the box. Not from Gerald. Unless... She turned to the cardboard shipping envelope still half sealed on her kitchen counter, the one that had arrived anonymously 2 days ago. She had assumed it was merch. A fan sending her something related to the podcast. She hadn't opened it. Hands shaking, she peeled the flap. Inside was a worn, leather-bound notebook, cracked with age. Embossed on the cover, nearly rubbed away, F. Laird, case. She opened the first page and stared. His handwriting was hurried, uneven. The first sentence read, "They told me I'd forget. That time would fold. That mirrors are just one-way windows until you listen too long." And on the opposite page, written in red ink, not yet faded, "A woman will come. She will find the rest. Do not let her play the final tape." Chapter 18. The Threshold. Ava turned each page with growing dread. The ink bled in places, but the words remained legible. Hurried, feverish, shifting between observation and confession. It was a slow descent. The notebook started with procedural details, dates, names, interviews, then sketches, mirror placements, frequency notations, fragments of symbols. By page 20, the voice had changed. Less detective, more witness, survivor. Laird had described room 6 in painful detail, its geometry, its silence, the way the air never moved. He mentioned seeing himself from the outside, watching as someone else made decisions in his body. He had traced the signal to a point not fixed by time, but by memory, and referred to a second mirror, one that didn't reflect anything unless it was dark. He called it the listening glass. The pages thinned toward the middle. The final section was labeled only, the boundary, and beneath that, 12 observations. Read only once. Read only aloud. Ava paused. Her apartment was still. Outside, traffic passed, muffled and harmless. Her own mirror, now covered with a wool blanket, sat quiet, but she felt it. Watching. Even now, she read. Room 6 is not a location. It's a frequency that uses space as disguise. Reflection is a memory. The moment you stare too long, It rewrites what remembers you. The signal never ends. It waits. It studies. It returns when you forget it. Dawn is not a name. Dawn is a pronoun, short for the forgotten phrase, do not. I met myself in room 6. He begged me not to enter. I entered anyway. The mirrors are not doors. They're speakers. What they say is always true until you believe it. I found her, Dorothy, but she was already behind the glass. I saw her blink on the wrong beat. When I leave something behind. I do not know what it is. The signal moves through families, through lines, through voices. A woman will come. She will try to seal it again. Do not help her. If you hear your own voice calling you, run. After the 6th minute, nothing you see belongs to your world. Ava sat in silence. The notebook fell shut, and from behind her, from the mirror still covered in cloth, came a sound. 3 knocks. Then, Ava, her name, whispered in her own voice. But she hadn't spoken. Chapter 19. A Girl in the Silver. Dorothy Hardin stopped dreaming the day Frank vanished. Not because she slept soundly, but because she barely slept at all. The moment she closed her eyes, she could feel them again. The ones from the mirror, the quiet ones. They didn't speak, didn't move. They just watched. She had moved into a boarding room above a bakery on 18th Street, far from the hotel. A single bed, no furniture, no mirrors. But it didn't matter. Anything with a reflection could find her now. Windows at night, puddles in the gutter, even the shine of a silver spoon. They weren't looking through the glass. They were in it. And every night, sometime between 3 and 4 a.m., she'd wake with the same phrase in her head. You're not the last. You're the first. She didn't understand it. Until the letter arrived. No return address. No stamp. Just a folded envelope slid beneath her door. Inside was a photograph, an old one, sepia-toned, creased at the corners. A girl in a white dress, standing in front of a mirror that showed no reflection. And on the back, in Laird's handwriting, her name was Helen. She remembered too late. Dorothy's hands shook. She'd seen this mirror before. Not in the hotel, not in Thorn Hollow, but in a photograph buried deep in her mother's things when she died. She remembered the inscription, President Hotel, long before Owen, long before Dorothy was born. And yet the girl in the photo looked like her. Exactly like her. She packed a bag. She returned to the hotel president the next morning, knowing what she was doing was dangerous, perhaps even stupid. But Laird was gone, and he'd left her something to finish. She snuck through the back, avoided the clerk, and took the stairs to the 10th floor. The hallway was quiet. Room 1046 was closed. Room 6 was sealed, but she didn't need to open it. The mirrors along the corridor, cleaned daily, shined without fail, had begun to fog. Even now, in daylight, as she passed, she looked once, only once, and saw the girl again, in a white dress, smiling. But Dorothy wasn't smiling, and she wasn't wearing white. The girl in the mirror raised a hand, slowly, deliberately, and traced a message into the fogged glass. Do not follow. You are already here. Dorothy backed away, but her reflection didn't. It stayed, staring, and in its eyes, she saw something behind the silver, something tall, watching, waiting. Chapter 20. Echoes of her voice. Ava didn't speak for the rest of the day. Not out loud, not even to herself. Every time she opened her mouth, she imagined her own voice answering just behind her, from somewhere she couldn't see. The notebook sat closed on the kitchen table. Her phone was turned off. She unplugged every screen in her apartment. The mirror remained covered, but the wool blanket now pulsed softly in the breeze of a fan she hadn't turned on. She paced, tried to eat, couldn't. Her stomach turned with every step. Something about the notebook's 12th observation stuck in her head like a song lyric she couldn't shake. After the 6th minute, nothing you see belongs to your world. What had Laird seen? What had he become? She sat down and opened her laptop. She didn't even know what she was searching for anymore. She typed, Room 6 mirror anomalies. Then, max headroom signal decoded. Then finally, without meaning to, what happens if you talk to your reflection? The results were useless. Forum posts, paranormal message boards, YouTube thumbnails screaming about cursed hotels and dimension slips. But one link caught her eye. A broken video post titled The Echo Test. It had no views, no likes, no upload date. The thumbnail was black. She clicked it. The screen flashed, then static, then her own face. Looking into the camera, same clothes, same background. But her mouth wasn't moving, and behind her, the mirror, uncovered, and something walking past it. The video played for exactly 6 minutes, then ended. She sat frozen, staring at the reflection in the now black screen. The reflection stared back and blinked. She hadn't. Ava stood and turned toward the mirror. The blanket lay on the floor. She hadn't removed it. The mirror was uncovered. Inside it, herself, but not. This version of her was paler, lips dry, eyes wide, alert. The reflection raised a hand slowly, but Ava hadn't moved. It smiled. A tiny, strange, crooked smile. Then mouthed the words, "I remember everything." Eva backed away, heart racing, stumbling into the hallway outside her apartment. She fumbled for her keys, her phone, anything, a plan. She turned to run down the stairs and froze. Standing at the end of the hallway, beneath the flickering exit light, was a man in a suit too old for the decade. Tall, thin, face lost in shadow. He raised his hand and tapped gently on the air. 1, 2, 3. Then said her name, soft, gentle, Ava. Her knees buckled. He smiled. Dawn is ready. Chapter 21. Her other voice. January 4th.
Hotel President, 8th floor archives.
Dorothy walked with her head down and her collar up. The bellhop didn't recognize her. The night clerk was asleep at the front desk. The elevator wheezed, old and mechanical, the lights inside flickering against her eyes. She didn't need a room. She didn't need to be seen. She just needed to know. The manager's archive office on the 8th floor hadn't been used in years. Her hands knew the key. The door, the sequence of steps past the filing cabinets and into the back. There were boxes there, sealed since the first fire in 1915. Few remembered that the hotel had ever closed, even briefly. She opened the box labeled Room Changes. Inside, blueprints, guest logs, complaints, security reports, and one letter. Yellowed, typed, dated April. Subject, persistent guest disturbances. Room, it read. Several complaints have arisen regarding sounds at odd hours. Tapping, murmurs in the sense that someone is present inside room 6 when unoccupied. A Miss Helen Ashcroft was found speaking to her reflection and refusing to respond to staff. She has since disappeared from her room and has not returned. Recommend sealing the mirror until renovations. Dorothy's blood ran cold. Ashcroft. The girl from the photograph. The one who looked like her. The one who might have been her. She flipped the paper over. A handwritten note on the back, in faint pencil. She didn't vanish. She moved inward. Dorothy left the archive room and climbed to the 10th floor, her footsteps quiet. The hallway was still, the air dense and waiting. Her own shadow stretched before her like something leading the way. Room 6 was gone now, replaced by a storage closet, but she didn't need a door. She stopped in front of the wall where it used to be. Her reflection in the hallway mirror was there, waiting, and it wasn't her. It looked like her, stood like her. But something in the eyes was too still, too patient. She reached out and touched the glass. The reflection did not move. Then slowly, it opened its mouth. Dorothy never heard the words, but she saw her own lips forming them on the other side. "You're home." A bell rang somewhere far below, and Dorothy Harden stepped into the mirror. She was never seen again. Chapter 22. The Listening Side. There is no sound here. Only the memory of sound. No time. Only the delay between a thought and its echo. This place is not a room. It never was. It is what remains when the light no longer reflects. When a mirror stops showing what is and begins to show what was left behind. Here they gather, the quiet ones. They do not speak. They do not sleep. They do not move unless remembered. They are watchers, not by choice. Each one was once a person. A woman brushing her hair at night. A child peering over a bathroom sink. A man in a hotel waiting for a call that never came. Each looked too long, listened too deeply. Now they remain behind the silver. They have no names, only impressions, only fragments of voice and gesture. They shift through mirrored halls, through places long demolished, through reflections that still remember rooms torn down decades ago. They cannot return unless invited. But when someone says their own name out loud while looking into the glass, they find a way through, and in their place, something must be left behind. In one corridor, a figure walks. He wears a hat, carries a notebook, but his eyes are not his anymore. He speaks to no one, but his lips move. Over and over. 6 minutes. 6 minutes. He is remembering something important. Something about a woman who listens. She is close. She is very close now. Chapter 23. The glass inside her. Ava woke to the sound of her own voice humming. The sun had not risen yet. Her apartment was still dark, save for the faint red pulse of her cassette deck's power light. She lay on the floor, back stiff, neck aching, unsure when or how she had fallen asleep. The last thing she remembered was the hallway, the man in the suit, the name. Her voice kept humming, low and steady. But her lips weren't moving. She sat up slowly. The sound stopped. The mirror across the room was uncovered. Not shattered, not fogged, just waiting. She had covered it before. She was sure of that. Folded the blanket over it 3 times, anchored it with a chair. She would have bet her life on it. Now it stood bare, still, empty. Except it wasn't empty. The reflection wasn't hers. Not entirely. The version in the mirror wore her face, yes. Same frame, same posture. But her eyes were darker, her shoulders straighter. There was no fear in that Ava, only patience. Ava stepped forward. So did the reflection. In perfect rhythm, she raised a hand. So did the mirror. But just as their fingers aligned, her reflection smiled. A strange, unfamiliar smile. Then its mouth moved. Ava. The voice filled the room. Identical to hers, flawless in tone and pitch, but slow, too slow, dragged, like tape unraveling. Ava stepped back. The reflection did not. It stayed, still smiling, hand still raised. Then it whispered, "Do you remember the girl in the white dress?" Ava's blood ran cold. She didn't remember. Not really, but something in the words reached down into a part of her memory that didn't feel like hers. A white hallway, a cracked mirror, hands not her own. She turned from the mirror and grabbed the notebook again. Laird's words swam before her eyes. She flipped back to the page with the observations and focused on one line. The mirrors are not doors, they're speakers. Ava walked to her kitchen drawer and pulled out a roll of duct tape. She started covering the edges of the mirror, sealing every seam, every corner, every line where silver met wall. As she worked, the voice in the room grew louder. "Ava, Ava, Dawn is here." She ignored it, kept taping, layer over layer, and then it stopped. The silence was worse. She turned, slowly. The mirror was gone, still framed in the wall, but there was no glass now. Just a hollow square, like a window into blackness. And in the center of that blackness, a shape, tall, thin, impossibly still. She stared, her breath caught. The figure stepped forward, but its foot made no sound. Ava's body refused to move. The figure reached the frame and smiled. A voice poured out, Not from its mouth, but from the walls, from inside her own ears, from the notebook still clutched in her hand. 6 minutes, it said, and reached through the frame. Its hand touched her chest, and for a moment, everything flickered. She saw herself in the apartment, and also in a mirror. At the same time, one Ava looked terrified, the other was already smiling. The figure spoke once more. She remembers now. Chapter 24, Crossing the Glass. It felt like stepping into ice. Eva didn't walk through the mirror. She fell into it. One moment, the figure's hand was pressed to her chest. The next, everything inverted. Her apartment peeled away like wallpaper soaking off a wall. Light bent, walls stretched. Her body didn't move, but the space around her did, folding inward like a collapsing lung. There was no sensation of falling, just absence. No breath, no noise, no heartbeat, like being pulled backward through silence itself. Then, ground. She blinked. She was lying on a black and white tiled floor, edges warped like heat shimmer. The air smelled faintly of wax and something older like burnt paper and bleach. She sat up slowly, her vision catching strange light. Everything here had a film grain to it, as if she were seeing the world through a broken TV screen. Hard, cold, damp, carpeted. She stood. She was in a hotel corridor. Dim, no numbers on the doors, no signage. But she recognized the pattern. Only, not quite. This was the hallway from the President Hotel. She stepped forward. Her footsteps made no sound. Everything was mirrored, flipped left to right. Like a film negative, like a memory, half recalled. The doors along the hall were closed, but one 3 doors down was cracked open. A sliver of light shone beneath it, flickering, as if a television played inside, cycling static. Ava approached it, slowly. She didn't want to open it. She opened it anyway. Inside was a room identical to her own apartment, but wrong. Colors faded, shadows long and breathing. A mirror stood across from the door, larger than any she'd seen, reaching from floor to ceiling. But the version of her in the glass was already waiting, and in the center of the mirror, her studied. She watched. She didn't mimic Ava's movements. Ava followed the gesture, then raised a hand and pointed to the far corner of the room. There was a desk there, an old one. On it sat a tape recorder, the reel-to-reel kind, buzzing faintly. Manila, stamped in black ink. Next to it, a file, RT Owen 1046, deep copy. Inside, photographs of her. She opened it with trembling hands, sitting in her apartment, speaking, sleeping, recording her podcast. Another showed her standing at the mirror, with dawn behind her. One photo was dated 2 days ago, but taken from above, as if from the ceiling light in her living room. The mirror flickered. Eva stumbled back, and from the speakers on the reel-to-reel her own voice echoed. Ava stared in horror. Test 1 mirror observation begins. Subject, A. Weaver. Duration, 6 minutes. Signal integrity stable. Awaiting instruction from Dawn. She hadn't recorded that. The voice continued, flat and emotionless, but the voice was hers. She didn't remember that. Ava turned just in time to see herself smile. Phase 1 complete. Subject entering memory cascade. Identity remains intact. She still believes she is real. The mirror behind her shivered, leaving her alone in the mirrored room,
and walk away.
Then the walls began to close, not physically, but subtly. Every second, they leaned in. Grew darker. She tried to open the door, but it was gone. Only the mirror remained. And now, someone else stood in it. Not Dawn, someone new. Not her. A girl in a white dress. A child. She raised her hand and pressed it to the glass. The room dimmed to black, and Ava remembered a name she hadn't spoken since childhood. One she was never supposed to say again. Her real name, not the one she used now. And from inside the mirror, the child whispered, "Come see what you forgot." Chapter 25. slightly wrong. Eli Torres didn't worry at first. It wasn't just that Ava had gone silent. Ava had disappeared before. Not literally, but in her own way, retreating into research spirals, deep dives into obscure case files, and entire weekends lost to editing and paranoia. That was her process. Eli knew how to give her space, knew that when she was ready, a 3-minute voice memo would show up with 10 new episode pitches and 12 new questions. But this time, something was off. It was that she had sent him something first. The email arrived at 3:11 a.m. No subject, no message body, just a file attachment. Test cut final, 6 points. Eli opened it without hesitation. He expected raw narration, a sample clip, maybe even a sleep-deprived rant. What he got instead was Ava's voice. Sort of. The pacing was wrong. The tone was flat, 3 knocks. And in the background, barely audible, a rhythm, the cadence, a beat behind what felt natural, like someone rehearsing how she spoke. He stopped the playback. Then her voice, whispering low. Observation 6 complete. Subject stable. She does not know yet. Tried to call. No answer. Not even voicemail. Just static. He had only been here once before, months ago, to drop off gear. It was in a quiet, older building. 6th floor. No camera buzzer. No neighbors in sight. He knocked once. By noon, he was outside her apartment. Still nothing. Again, nothing. Smiling. Ava stood in the doorway. He was about to leave when the door opened. "Hey, Eli," she said. Same voice, same clothes as he remembered. Not big, not wide, just enough. "You okay?" he asked. They didn't quite follow his movements. They tracked his face, but not his gaze, as if she were watching something behind him. But something in her eyes was different. He walked in. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. The apartment was cold, and there were no lights on despite the sun outside. The mirror on the wall was uncovered, clean, not chilly. Cold, but not Ava. She wasn't there. The reflection showed him. Eli turned slowly. Ava was at the kitchen counter, hands wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't sipped from. In the mirror, she was missing. She smiled again. Too much this time. "I got your file," he said. "What was that?" "Just a test. Didn't mean to send it." Eli hesitated. She tilted her head. "You sure you're all right?" And blinked. Twice. Once. Then didn't blink again. He stepped back toward the mirror. For a very long time, only his own. Her reflection still wasn't there. And behind him, something moved. A shape without a face. Very, very slowly. In the corner of the mirror, Eli turned. Ava still stood by the counter, now sipping the empty mug. Nothing there. She nodded. "Okay, Eli. I should go," he said. Then added, after a beat too long. Her voice dropped just a bit too low on the last word. "See you soon." He left without looking back. In the stairwell, heart racing, he played the audio file one more time. And this time, near the end, he heard something new. His own voice, from the hallway, saying, "I should go." Before he ever said it, Chapter 26, Ava. Unwritten. There was no sense of time in the mirror world. Not anymore. Ava walked through corridors that shifted behind her, walls breathing softly like lungs. The air smelled of old paper and candle wax, though no light source could be seen. The hallway walls were lined with ornate frames, all holding mirrors, some cracked, others fogged, none reflecting her properly. Sometimes she passed a version of herself in the glass, watching from the other side of the hall. Sometimes the mirror showed other people entirely, a man in a fedora writing furiously in a leather notebook, a girl in a white dress humming to no tune, an older woman in a hotel uniform standing motionless, eyes wide, lips moving soundlessly. Dorothy. Dorothy was still here, somewhere. Ava knew it without knowing how. "Remember!" She came to a door. Black wood. No handle. A brass plate etched with a single word. She pressed her palm against it. Inside, a room shaped like her apartment, but wrong. The walls were lined with photos of people she didn't recognize. Some had been scratched out. Some were duplicated. A mirror hung over the bed. Her reflection lay on the mattress, sleeping. Eyes open. The door opened. Ava stepped toward it, then spoke. The reflection blinked. "Do you know your real name yet?" Ava stared. Her throat felt tight. She began. But the words broke apart. The reflection sat up. "You're not Ava. Not here. Not behind the silver. That name was assigned. Do you want to know what they called you first?" "No," she whispered. Now they faced each other, like twins misaligned by a few seconds. "Yes," the reflection said. It stood. "I'm what you left behind," it said. "The thoughts you forget the moment you speak them. I'm the voice that echoes when no one else is listening." But the room grew smaller. Ava stepped back. The ceiling bent inward. The mirror behind her began to glow. And then the door opened again, but this time from the other side. The girl in the white dress. A child stepped in. Same age. Same face. Always smiling. She walked straight to Ava and whispered into her ear. Ava froze. "Do you want to remember what happened in room 6? The girl tilted her head. "But you were born in it." "I've never been to room 6, she said. Now it showed a hotel room in black and white. The mirror behind them changed. An old bed, a rotary phone off the hook. Words carved above the mirror. Blood on his shirt. A man kneeling beside the desk, scrawling something on the wall. She will not forget this time. Ava turned to speak, but her reflection was gone. Only the child remained. And Dawn, standing behind her now. Not smiling, not moving. Chapter 27. The signal beneath her skin. Just waiting. Each one was furnished differently. A hotel suite from 1954, a motel in New Mexico with a rattling AC unit, a 1920s ballroom stripped of dancers, a room lit only by a single bulb swaying above a mirror so large it cast no reflection at all. Not hallways, rooms. Ava followed the child through a corridor made of rooms. They passed through them silently. The child in the white dress did not speak again. She only stopped when they reached a room Ava recognized. Her childhood bedroom, down to the creased wallpaper and the cracked porcelain lamp shaped like a swan. Except, Ava had never told anyone what this room looked like. And there, on the nightstand, was a tape recorder. And yet, here it was. The same one from her adult apartment. Waiting. Rewound. She pressed play. Her own voice poured out, but not words. A rhythm. A hum. Then whispers layered behind it. Familiar and not. Names she had forgotten. Places she had dreamed. She has the key now. A phrase repeated 5 times. The child sat on the floor and looked up at her. "You were born in room 6, she said softly. "Not as a baby. As a thought." Ava couldn't breathe. "You were made from the moment she touched the glass." "Who?" Ava asked, but she already knew. The girl smiled. "Dorothy." Walls peeled back. The room shifted. Now they stood in a hotel room from cracked plaster, faded green wallpaper, a rotary phone buzzing off the hook, blood pooled beneath a tipped-over chair. On the bed, a man shirtless, dying, his mouth moving soundlessly. Ava stepped closer, but as she approached, the body turned to face her. It was Roland T. Owen, and it was layered. "Ava!" She backed away, but the floor lengthened beneath her feet. He blinked. His lips formed her name. The mirror at the far end of the room stretched like a tunnel, swallowing light. She was being pulled. She was no longer walking. Inside it, she saw herself. Not the reflection. The real her, standing in her apartment, typing, recording, smiling, as Dawn stood behind her, unseen. Ava screamed, but the sound came out as static. Her skin burned. The signal, deep inside her now, began to pulse. She looked down. Her arm had symbols drawn across it, tattoos she had never gotten, coordinates, dates, words in Cyrillic, Hebrew, Latin. Her body was becoming a record. a transmission point. Don had told the truth. The signal never ended. Because the signal wasn't just sound. It was a person. It was her. She collapsed to the floor, hands over her ears. The child knelt beside her. "There's still time," the girl whispered. "But you have to choose." Choose what? Her reflection stood in the glass now. Who stays in the mirror? And who walks back through? Ava looked up, reaching out a hand, smiling. "Let me finish what you started," it said. Chapter 28. Her signature was always there. He hadn't meant to dig this deep. Eli sat in the city records office, surrounded by dust, fluorescent light, and the low hum of forgotten buildings echoing through paper. But Normal had left the conversation days ago. Since he left her apartment, the world felt slightly tilted. He told himself he was just checking on a permit, something to do with Ava's renovation contacts. Maybe the origin of that old mirror she'd restored. Something logical, something normal. Ava's smile lingered in his head, not for its sweetness, but for its stillness. That blankness behind the warmth, like a mask with a voice. He couldn't shake what he hadn't seen. And then there was the reflection. Ava wasn't in that mirror, only him, and something else. Now he sat with a clerk's key in hand, unlocking the oldest guest registry books from the President Hotel, long since rebranded, renamed, remodeled. He flipped to January. The paper crackled with age. Ink faded into parchment. Names blurred. Roland T. Owen. There, clear as day. A scribbled warning. Not real. Alias. Watching the mirrors. Beside it, notes from the detective. He flipped ahead, through decades of names. Pages went blank between 1946 and 1957. Someone had removed whole sections. Then again in the late... And finally, written in the guest book under the year, Ava Weaver. Ava's name faded, but clear. His breath caught, in cursive. Something about the ink shimmered faintly, as if the signature had been there longer than the paper itself. He touched the page, but Ava never checked in under her own name. She had visited, investigated, but never booked a room. Not one. He looked closer. It read, next to her name, a column marked duration of stay, permanent. He backed away from the desk. The clerk at the front raised an eyebrow. He walked out into the street. The cold wind hit his face. He stared at the modern hotel sign. Eli didn't answer. "You okay?" The atlas downtown, but in the shadow it cast, the bricks still read, President Hotel, waving. And for a second, in the lobby window, he saw Ava inside, smiling. But when he turned to look again, Chapter 29, the trait, she was gone. Too symmetrical. Ava stood between two versions of herself. The one before her in the mirror looked exactly right down to the scar above her left eyebrow, the silver ring on her index finger, the tired lines under her eyes. But everything about her posture, her voice, her stillness, too prepared. The child in the white dress stood beside her, too much like someone who had rehearsed being Ava. Ava's chest tightened. "Only one of you leaves," she said. "Why?" The child tilted her head. The reflection raised a hand, palm out. "Because the door only opens for the one who believes she belongs. I can carry the signal," it said softly. "I can finish the work. I can keep the others out." Ava shook her head. "I didn't ask for this." "You investigated," said the reflection. "You opened the box. You listened to the voice. You looked too long. That's the invitation." The room trembled just slightly. The mirrors along the walls shimmered. Each one showed a different version of her life. In one, she was a child staring into a bathroom mirror as her mother cried behind her. In another, she stood at her podcast mic, unaware of Dawn's shape in the reflection behind her. In yet another, she was sleeping peacefully, but the glass above her bed was cracked. Watch. Ava stepped back. She turned to the child. "If I stay here, what happens?" "You become part of the signal," said the girl. A shape in the silver. A whisper in someone else's reflection. A memory no one can quite place. "And if I go, you forget all of this." The mirror closes. For now, Ava hesitated. The reflection smiled. Ava's hands began to tremble. She reached into her coat pocket without thinking and felt paper. It's already happening, it said. You felt it. The moments you can't remember. The lines you hear yourself speak before you say them. That's the delay. That's me. Still intact. She pulled it out. Laird's notebook. She flipped to the final page. One new line had appeared, still cold. She looked up. If you want to stay yourself, you have to prove you're real. The reflection was watching her, waiting, smiling, silent. The child stepped away, and the room asked her one question. Who are you really? Then opened them, breathed. Ava closed her eyes. I'm the one who remembers. And she reached forward, not toward the mirror, but into her own memory. She saw her first voice test, her first story edit, the first moment she doubted something was real, long before she found the box. And she saw the girl in the white dress, watching her from the corner, not warning her, not threatening, just waiting for Ava to become her. She pulled her hand away from the mirror, and the reflection stopped smiling. I want to be free. I don't want to be carried, Ava whispered, and Ava fell. The mirrors shattered. The reflection screamed, lying on the floor. When she opened her eyes, she was back in her apartment. Sunlight through the window. She sat up, heart racing, her voice recorder blinking red. The mirror was still intact, and she blinked at the exact same time. Only her looked back. But this time, when she looked into it, she couldn't. Ava didn't leave her apartment for 2 days. Chapter 30. Her body still felt foreign. Not in pain, but misaligned. Like her bones remembered a different layout. Sometimes her left hand moved just a second before she told it to. Sometimes her voice sounded too flat in her own ears, like it was still echoing back to her through glass. The notebook was gone. Laird's notebook gone. The tape recorder gone. Even the mirror, once large and immovable, now sat covered again, smaller somehow, duller. But she remembered every room, every version of herself. The reflection, the choice. She kept whispering one sentence to herself. I'm the one who remembers. It helped, until she found the photograph. It was lying beneath her couch, not hers, not something she had printed. Black and white, old, sepia edges, a girl in a white dress, staring into a mirror that showed nothing at all. Written on the back, "We're not done." Her hand trembled. She flipped it again. Now the mirror in the photo did show something. Her, Ava, in the background, watching the girl, smiling. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She simply walked to the wall where the mirror was bolted, touched the cloth, and whispered, I let myself out. You don't get to follow. The glass beneath the cloth hummed once, then fell silent. But outside her apartment, across the hall, in the empty unit that had been under renovation since January, a faint reflection moved across the blank television screen. Not Ava, not quite. It blinked once and waited. Chapter 31. The first face. Ava used to dread going outside. Now she couldn't stand being inside. The mirror remained covered, but the memory of it hummed in her walls, in the flicker of her overhead lights, in the faint hum of her refrigerator late at night. The signal wasn't active anymore. Not like before, but it wasn't gone. It had left something behind. She could feel it in the spaces between words, in the places memory didn't quite reach, and always at the edges of sleep. She saw her, the girl in the white dress, still smiling, still waiting. Ava had questions now. She'd spent a week off the grid. No updates, no uploads, no texts. She started from scratch. Timeline, artifacts, events. There was a pattern. The first known incident tied to the mirror was in Helen Ashcroft, the girl who vanished after speaking to her reflection in the original Room 6. A note in the President Hotel's earliest archives claimed she had been hearing things before her disappearance, static in the walls, someone calling her name in her own voice. Ava traced the name to a city birth record. Helen had a sister, younger, died in infancy. Or so it said. But Ava had seen her, in the mirror world, walking beside her, smiling. It hadn't been Helen. It had been the sister. The one history said didn't survive. Except she had. In the silver, in the quiet, Ava filed a records request under a false name. The state archive returned with one image, one photo, one line of handwriting on the back. Helen. Night. Ava stared. Emmeline Ashcroft. Age. And it was her, the girl in the dress. Same face, same blank joy, same eyes that had watched Ava walk the mirrored halls. The photo's back read only, "She disappeared into the looking glass." But her voice came back first. Ava packed a bag. No tech, no tape, just paper, gloves, flashlight. She wasn't afraid now. She was going to find where Emmeline first stood when the mirror opened. Because if there's a first entrance, there might still be a last one. Chapter 32. Where the mirror first opened. The house sat at the end of a dirt road in Clay County, half swallowed by the earth. The land around it was starved, brown, and cracked, the trees leafless even in spring. No power lines reached it. No mail, not even birds in the sky. Ava parked 50 feet away and walked the rest on foot. Each step felt like entering an old photograph, colors draining, air thickening, memory getting louder. She'd found the deed in an old court ledger, property of Simon and Margaret Ashcroft, filed 1907, abandoned since 1915. Declared unsalvageable by... No one had lived here since Emmeline disappeared. No one had even tried. The front door wasn't locked. It didn't even hang straight on its hinges. Inside, the air smelled like dust and time. No graffiti, no signs of squatters, just the slow rot of wood and wallpaper, and a silence so complete it pressed against her ribs. Ava walked through the foyer, past the remains of a parlor, until she found the staircase, half-rotted, barely walkable. At the top, a hallway bent sharply left. And at the end of that hallway, a room with a single door. Its frame had been reinforced, as if someone once tried to seal it shut, but it had since split open. Ava pushed inside. The room was empty, except for one thing. A mirror, still mounted to the wall, oval-shaped, framed in black ash wood, covered in dust, but not broken. Ava stepped closer. She wiped the surface with her sleeve and saw herself. Just herself. No movement out of sync. No voices. No smile. Just her. She stared. Waited. Nothing. And then, a flicker. Only for a second. A face behind her. Child-sized. Smiling. Gone. Ava turned. Nothing there. She faced the mirror again. And the mirror began to whisper, not with sound, but with memory. She saw the original room 6 clean, lit by gaslight. She saw Emmeline standing in front of the mirror alone. Her parents arguing in another room, the child looking up, tilting her head, whispering, "You can come through, but only if you sound like me." The mirror shimmered, and something came through. Ava stumbled back, heart pounding. The vision faded. The one word remained, written on the glass in the dust. "Listen." She leaned closer, and the mirror vibrated beneath her fingertips. Then a sound, faint, a voice. Ava Weaver, age 34. Entry logged. Awaiting replication. She backed away. "No," she whispered. But the voice continued. "Replication approved." The glass rippled. And from behind it, another Ava opened her eyes.
Chapter 33. The second Ava.
Ava didn't move. Neither did the reflection. They stared at each other across the mirror's surface. One made of breath and memory, the other of glass and intention. The second Ava stood still inside the oval frame, eyes wide, posture perfect. But her pupils didn't dilate. Her skin didn't shift with breath. She was alive, but not quite real. Not yet. Ava stepped closer. Her voice was low. "Who are you?" The reflection tilted its head. The same motion Ava had made countless times without realizing. Muscle memory. "I'm who you were going to be," it said. "Before you said no." Ava felt the room tighten. "You're not me." "Not yet." the reflection agreed. But I've been rehearsing. She swallowed.
What do you want?
To complete the work, the other Ava said. To continue the signal, you interrupted it. That can't happen again. Ava looked down. The dust at her feet was shifting gently, like wind through water. The house was listening. The mirror vibrated softly, humming now in her teeth. The other Ava smiled. There are too many like you, she said. Curious, willing, weak. The signal requires stability. You're a recording. I'm a backup. Ava's breath caught. The mirror's edges were glowing faintly now, like heat behind a wall. And what happens to me? She asked. The smile deepened. Not unkind. You were never meant to stay this long. Ava reached into her coat, hand shaking. Inside her pocket, the photograph of Emmeline, still warm. Still here. She held it up to the mirror. You left her behind, too. The second Ava looked down. Something flickered in her expression. Recognition. Almost guilt. Emmeline opened the door, she said softly, but she didn't close it. That was meant to be you. Ava felt something slide into place in her chest, like a lock clicking open. I'm not here to finish the transmission, she said. I'm here to shut it down. The mirror darkened instantly. The copy's face contorted, surprised, not afraid. You can't. I can. She stepped forward and pressed her palm against the glass. It was warm now, pulsing. I'm not the echo, Ava whispered. I'm the one who remembers. The mirror cracked, a long, slow fracture running from top to bottom. The second Ava opened her mouth, but her voice came out in static. The house began to shake. The walls groaned. The mirror screamed, not with sound, but with loss. Then it shattered, and Ava fell to her knees, covered in dust and silence. The house went still, and for the first time since she entered the mirror's world, she was alone. Chapter 34. The last frequency. The knock on the door was soft. Ava had been expecting it. She opened it without speaking. Eli stood in the hallway, eyes tired, holding a manila folder under one arm and a cassette in his other hand. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and hugged her. She didn't resist. He said nothing at first. Just held her. Then finally, you came back. I think so, she said. You're not all the way here, are you? She paused. No, but I remember enough. They sat across from each other at her kitchen table. The mirror was covered again, this time with more than a blanket lined with foil, padding, tape, and a layer of old books stacked in front of it. Still, they both kept glancing toward it. Eli laid the cassette down. This came in the mail. No return address. Postmarked the day after you disappeared. Ava stared at it. No label, just a number. Eli pressed play. At first only static. Then a hum, rhythmic, layered, not noise. Music, but buried inside it. Voices, whispers. Ava leaned in. Her own voice, her old voice. Reading a script she never wrote. Eli's voice too. Breathing, counting, syncing with the rhythm. And then a child's laughter. A sentence, soft and slow. She left the door open. The tape cut out. Neither of them moved for a full minute. Ava looked at the books. I shattered it, she said. The source, the replica, the copy, but something still broadcasting. Eli whispered. She nodded. There's one signal left? She opened the folder Eli brought. Inside, a printout from the FCC archives, decades old. A license registered to a forgotten rural radio tower 30 miles outside Kansas City. Call sign, W. Status, decommissioned. Broadcast frequencies. Eva smiled sadly. Of course it is. They left before sunset. No microphones, no laptop, just flashlights, gloves, bolt cutters, salt. As the car pulled onto the empty road heading north, Ava rolled down the window, wind in her hair, breath steady. Do you think it'll let us shut it down? Eli asked. Ava looked ahead. No. Then why try? She smiled. Because someone has to remember. Chapter 35. Room 6. Seal. The radio tower wasn't on any current maps. It stood in a collapsed field beside a drained reservoir, the landscape wide and hollow, the color of dried bone. Birds circled far overhead, but none landed. Not even the wind stayed long. The base of the tower was wrapped in barbed wire, but the lock on the gate had rusted through. Ava and Eli stepped over a collapsed fence and found the service building half sunken into the earth. A cracked brick shell, a steel door. The signal pulsed softly in the ground. They could feel it through their shoes. A frequency not heard, but remembered. The hum of memory without sound. They opened the door. Inside, darkness, a narrow staircase. Ava took the first step. Eli followed. The air below was still cold. Ancient. They found it at the bottom. A concrete room with no windows, no markings. In the center, a black mirror, 8 feet tall, mounted upright against the far wall. It was intact, untouched. But watch. Ava approached it slowly. She didn't speak, didn't blink. She looked into the glass and saw nothing. Not herself, not Dawn, not the girl in the dress. Only depth, endless, silver-black stillness. She turned to Eli. This is where it finishes. He nodded. What do we do? She set down her bag. From its 6 bricks of lead-reinforced concrete, tape, rebar anchors, a battery-powered welder, salt. She'd planned this. For years, maybe. She just didn't know it until now. They began sealing the mirror, layer by layer. The hum grew louder, then fainter. The mirror tried once to speak. A low sound, like a voice underwater. Ava leaned close, one last time, and whispered, "No more echoes." Then sealed the final edge. The room went silent. The floor beneath them stopped humming. And for the first time in over a century, room 6 was quiet. Outside, the sun was setting. The tower cast no shadow. Eli watched Ava as she poured the last of the salt across the doorway. "Do you think it's really over?" he asked. She thought for a long time, then said, "No, but it's as over as it can be." They drove home. They said nothing else. They never returned to the field. No one did. Epilogue. Memory lag. Somewhere in a quiet suburb, years later, a girl sat in front of an old television set. The TV wasn't on. Not really. It was tuned to static, a dead channel. But she liked the way the screen shimmered. Her mother had told her not to stare, that it could hurt her eyes, that it wasn't good for her to sit so still. But the girl liked it. She liked how the room seemed to hold its breath. She leaned forward, face close to the glass. And in the flickering static, something blinked. Not her, the screen. A shape, a face, a woman she didn't know, smiling. The girl tilted her head, curious, and whispered, almost to herself, "I remember you." Behind her, in the reflection of the darkened hallway mirror, another version of her said it at the same time. And you've reached the end of tonight's story. If you're still awake, thank you for listening. Until next time, sleep well. The Sleep Narrator.